Vansha kalpatarubhyasya Kripa sindhu bhaivacha patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaः. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminate Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Prachadane Vishesha Shunavadi Pashatade Shatare. Hare Krishna. So we continue our study of the 10th canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam from verse number 42 onwards. But just brief recap to what we studied and what we learned yesterday. Very important principles that we learned from yesterday's discussion. Who would volunteer? What did we learn yesterday? Quickly. Yes, Pranav.
Prabhuji, don't give trust to politician, king, and women.
On what basis that statement was written? Actually, is it not to trust the politician, king, or woman, or it is something else? What was written? It was mentioned not to trust the demoniac people, the asuras. And we saw in which context it was spoken. What was the reference? Yes, Brother Prabhu. What reference it came?
It is written that
Anyway, you're still not clear. I'll just give a recap and I'll move forward. Unless and until you show interest and heart, Bhagavatam will not sink in. It will not enter. So we saw yesterday, first the lineage, the dynasty in which Krishna will appear is being mentioned by Sukadeva Goswami. He begins with which king? Of the Yadu king. What was the name of the king? The first king's name that was mentioned? Surasena. Surasena. And from him comes Ugrasena. And in the Ugrasen lineage Vamsha, there is Kamsa. And there is also Devaki. Devaki is the daughter of his brother Devak, his younger brother Devak. And Devaki gets married to Vasudeva. And Kamsa is the son of Ugrasen. And Devaki is like the daughter of the younger brother of Ugrasen. So Devaki was treated like a very affectionate sister by Kamsa. And Kamsa was trying to serve her on her occasion of marriage with Vasudeva. And with a lot of opulence and a lot of gifts, which is mentioned in the form of dowry, was accompanying Devaki and Vasudeva when they were going towards Mathura, their hometown. And then, when the demigods in the heavens, in the high planets, they saw such affection between Kamsa and Devaki, they were very worried. If such affection is there, then how will Krishna kill Kamsa? So they made an omen. They made a declaration informing Kamsa that the eighth child of Devaki will become because of his death. And since then, as he heard this prophecy, Kamsa became very, very demoniac. And he immediately wanted to kill Devaki. But we see the expertise and the patience of Vasudeva. So Vasudeva gives them the enlightenment about the difference between the first level of understanding that one is not the body, one is spirit soul, and spirit soul is eternal. So this discourse is happening, and now we are on the 42nd verse. So we see that Vasudeva ji is speaking. This was the 41st verse that we did yesterday, where he said, having experienced the situation by seeing or hearing about it, one contemplates and speculates about the situation, and thus one surrenders to it, not considering his present body. Similarly, by mental adjustment, one dreams at night or living under different circumstances in different bodies and forget his own constitutional position. Under this same process, one gives up his present body and accepts another. So we have done this purport. We'll go to the 42nd verse. Yato yato dhavati devachoditam mano vikaratmanam apa panchashu guneshu maya rachiteshu deha so prapannat yamana sahatteja jayate. At the time of death, according to the thinking, willing and willing of the mind, which is involved in fruitive activities, one receives a particular body. In other words, the body develops according to the activities of the mind. Change of the body are due to the flickering of the mind, and otherwise the soul remains in its original spiritual body. So we see the discourse in a detailed way. Vasudeva is giving discourse on the temporality of the body and the eternal existence of the soul. So this first level of self-realization or Atma Tattva Jnana is being shared by Vasudeva to Kamsa. One can very easily understand the mind is constantly flickering, changing the quality of his thinking, feeling and willing. This is explained by Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita 6.34. Chanchalam hi mana Kṛṣṇa Kamati balabhadrana tasyaham nigraham manne vayureva sudushkaram. The mind is chanchala. Chanchala means it is always changing, flickering, and changes very strongly. Therefore, Arjuna admitted that controlling the mind is not at all possible. This would be as difficult as controlling the wind. For example, if one were in a boat moving towards the wind on a river or the sea, the wind was uncontrollable. The tilting boat would be very much disturbed and extremely difficult to control. It might even capsize. Therefore, in the Dhruva Samudra, the ocean of mental speculation and transmigration of different types of body, one must first control the mind. We have seen all yoga practices. The first and foremost thing is that one must control the mind and senses. So how to control the mind? Prabhupada gives the practical solution. By regulative principles, one can control it by strictly observing the regulated. For example, if the boat If one were moving in a boat according to the wind on a river or the sea, the wind were uncontrollable. The tilting boat would be very much disturbed and extremely difficult to control. It might even capsize. Therefore, in the Bhava Samudra, the ocean of mental speculation and transmigration, different types of body, one must first control the mind. By regulative principle, one can control the mind. And this is the purpose of yoga system. Abhyas Yoga Prema, Bhagavad Gita 8.8. But there is a chance of failure with the yoga system, especially in the age of Kali, because the yoga system uses artificial means. If the mind is engaged in Bhakti Yoga, however, by the grace of Kṛṣṇa, one can very easily control it. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has recommended Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Eva Kevalam. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila 17.21. One should chant the holy name of the Lord constantly, for the holy name of the Lord is not different from Hari, the Supreme Person. By chanting the Hare Krishna mantra constantly, one can fix the mind on the lotus feet of Kṛṣṇa. One moment. So Prabhupada is giving the solution. How to control the mind? By practice of regulative principles. And what is that regulation? What one thing very important one has to do in the regulation is by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra constantly. One can fix the mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. Savai Mana Krishna Pada Ravandeo. 9th Canto, 4th chapter, 18 verse. This is from Amrish Maharaj. In this way, achieve the perfection of yoga. Otherwise, the flickering mind will hover on the platform of mental speculation. Someone's microphone is on, so please mute. Otherwise, the flickering mind will hover on the platform of mental speculation for sense enjoyment, and one will have to transmigrate from one type of body to another because the mind is trained only in relation to the material effects. So one has to train the mind in the higher principles, eternal principles, the spiritual principle. Or in other words, to sense gratification, which is false. Maya Sukhaya Bharam Udvato Vimodha 7:9:43. Rascals, Vimodha. Being controlled by mental speculation make huge arrangement by which to enjoy life temporarily. But they must give up the body at the time of death, when everything is taken away by Krishna's external energy. Mrityu Sarvaras Chahan. Bhagavad Gita 10.34. At that time, whatever one has created in this life is lost, and one must automatically accept a new body by the force of material nature. In this way, one must have constructed a very tall skyscraper, but in the next life, because of one's mentality, one may have to accept a body like that of a dog, a tree, or perhaps a dog. Thus, the different body is offered by the law of material nature. Karanam guna sangasya sadasad yoni janmasu. The spirit soul takes birth in higher and lower species of life only because of his association with these three qualities of material nature. Urdham gacchanti sattvastha, madhye tishtanti rajasa, jagannanya gunavrittistha, adho gacchanti tamasa. Those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward with the higher planetary, and those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the abominable mode of ignorance go down to the hellish world. In conclusion, the Krishna consciousness movement offers the topmost welfare activity for human society. The saner section of human society must therefore take this movement very seriously for the benefit of all humanity. To save oneself from the repetition of birth and death, one must purify his consciousness. Sarvapadi vinodmuktam tatparatvena nirmalam. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya-lila, 19th chapter, 170 verse. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu teaching to Sri Rupa Goswami. One must be freed from all designations. I am American, I am Indian, I am this, I am that, and come to the platform for understanding that Kṛṣṇa is the original master. And we wear I am American, I am Indian, I am this, I am that, and come to the platform of understanding that Kṛṣṇa is the original master and we are his journey servant. When the senses are purified and engaged in Kṛṣṇa's service, one achieves the highest perfection. Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchate. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya-lila, 19th chapter and 170 verses. The Krishna consciousness movement is a movement of perfection. The Krishna consciousness movement is a movement of Bhakti Yoga. Vairagya Vidya Nij Bhakti Yoga. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya-lila, 6th chapter. Madhya-lila 19 to 170. The Krishna consciousness movement is a movement of Bhakti Yoga, Vairagya Vidya Nij Bhakti Yoga. By following the principle of this movement, one becomes disassociated from material spiritual world. By following the principles of this movement, one becomes disassociated from material mental concoction and is established on the original platform of the eternal relationship between the living entity and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As servant and master, this is the summary, is the purpose of Krishna consciousness. So we see in how much detail, how much logically Vasudeva is explaining all these spiritual truths to Kamsa. The first secondary reason for him is to save Devaki, and the second reason is to assist Kamsa. So he is assisting and he is also enlightening. Jyotiryatha udaka parthiveshvadha samiro veganugata vibhavate evam swamaya rachiteshu asavamsa guneshu raganuva vimuhyati. When the luminaries in the sky, such as the moon and sun and the stars, are reflected in liquids like oil or water, they appear to be different shapes. Sometimes round, sometimes long, and so on. When the luminaries in the sky, such as the moon, the sun, and the stars, are reflected in liquids like oil or water, they appear to be of different shapes, sometimes round, sometimes long, and so on. Because of the movements of the wind, similarly, when the living entity, the soul, is absorbed in materialistic thoughts, he accepts various manifestations of his own identity because of ignorance. In other words, one is bewildered by mental confusion because of the agitation from the material world of it. So, how much Vasudeva is explaining and how much he is giving logic. This verse gives a very good example by which to understand the different position of the eternal spiritual soul in the material world and how the soul takes on different bodies. Dehantar Prapte, Bhagavad Gita 2:130. The moon is stationary and is one, but when it is reflected in water or oil, it appears to take different shapes because of the movement of it. Similarly, the soul is the eternal servant of Kṛṣṇa. The living entity, sometimes a man, a dog, or a tree, and so on. By the influence of Maya, the illusionary potential of the supreme personality of Godhead, the living entity thinks that he is this person, that person, American, Indian, cat, dog, tree, or whatever. This is called Maya. When one is freed from the bewilderment and understands that all the soul does not belong to any shape of the material world. Sometimes a demigod, sometimes a man, a dog, a tree, and so on. But the influence of Maya, the illusionary potential of the supreme personality of Godhead, the living entity thinks that he is this person, that person, American, Indian, cat, dog, tree, or whatever. This is called Maya. Living entity thinks that he is this person, that person, American, Indian, cat, dog, or whatever. Freed from the bewilderment and understand that the soul does not belong to any shape of this material world. One is situated on the spiritual platform, Brahma Bhut. This realization is sometimes explained as Nirakar or formless. This formlessness, however, does not mean that the soul has no form. The soul has form, but the eternal agitating form that he has acquired because of material contamination is false. Because of material contamination is false. Similarly, God is also described as Nirakar, which means that the God has no material form, but Sachidananda Vigraha. The living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme, Sachidananda Vigraha, but his material forms are temporary or illusory. Both the living entity and the Supreme Lord have original spiritual form, Sachidananda Vigraha. But the Lord is supreme, does not change his form. We have discussed so many times. What is the difference? That the body of the Supreme is spiritual. The Supreme does not change his form. The Lord appears as he is, whereas the living entity appears because material nature forces him to accept a different form. When the living entity receives original spiritual form and understanding, he immediately surrenders to the supreme form, the personality of God. This is explained in the Bhagavad Gita 7:19. Bahunam janmanam ante jnanvan prapadyate. When the living entity, after many, many births, in different form, return to his original form of Kṛṣṇa consciousness, he immediately surrenders unto the lotus feet of the supreme form, Kṛṣṇa. This is the liberation that the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 18:54. Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma Na Shochati Na Kamshati Sama Sarveshu Bhuteshu Madhubhakte Lavate Para. One who is thus transcendently situated at once realizes the supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyed. He never laments or desires to have anything. He is equally disposed towards every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional submission. We have discussed this verse. Surrender unto the supreme form is the result of bhakti. Very important. Surrender unto the supreme Lord is the result of bhakti. This bhakti or understanding of one's own position will be complete liberation as long as one is under an impersonal understanding of the absolute truth. He is not in pure knowledge, but must still struggle for pure knowledge. Klesho adhikaras tesham avyar asak yetisan. Bhagavad-gītā 12.5. Although one may be spiritually advanced, if one is attracted to the impersonal feature of the absolute truth, he is not in pure knowledge, but must still struggle for pure impersonal feature knowledge. Okay. Although one may be spiritually advanced, if one is attached to the impersonal feature of the absolute truth, one must still work very hard, as indicated by the word klesho adhikaraste, which means great suffering. A devotee, however, easily attains to the position as the spiritual form and understands the supreme personality of Godhead in the original form. Very long proportion of what that is doing. Kṛṣṇa himself explains the form of the living entities in the second chapter of the Bhagavad-gītā. Very clearly says to Arjuna that he, Arjuna, and all of the living entities who were previously in their original form are separate individual identities. They were individuals in the past, they are now situated in individuality. Arjuna and other living entities who were previously in the original form are separate individual identities. They were individuals in the past, they are now situated in individuality, and in the future they will all continue to maintain their individual forms. The only difference is that the conditioned living entity appears in various material forms, whereas Kṛṣṇa appears in his original spiritual form. Unfortunately, those who are not advanced in spiritual knowledge think that Kṛṣṇa is like one of them, and that his form is like their material form. Abhijananti ma mudha manushim tanuma ashuta. 9.11. Kṛṣṇa is never puffed up by material knowledge and is therefore called Achyuta, whereas the living entities fall down and are agitated by material nature. This is the difference between the supreme and the living entity. In this connection, it is to be noted that Vasudeva, who was situated on the transcendental position, advises Kamsa not to commit further sinful activities. Kamsa, representative of the demon, was always greatly ready to kill Kṛṣṇa or God, whereas Vasudeva represents a transcendently situated person to whom Kṛṣṇa is born. Vasudeva is the son of Vasudeva. Vasudeva wanted his brother-in-law Kamsa to refrain from the sinful act of killing his sister. Since the result of being agitated by material nature would be that Kamsa would have to accept a body in which to suffer again. Elsewhere in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Rishabdev also says, Na sadhu manne yato atmano ayam asanapi kleshita ashitaha. As long as the living entity is entangled in the fruitive activities of so-called happiness and distress, he will receive a particular type of body in which to endure the three kinds of suffering due to material nature. Tap yantrana. An intelligent person, therefore, must free himself from the influence of the three modes of material nature. One must accept the process of birth, death, and old age and disease. One is therefore advised that an intelligent person, instead of being entangled in so-called good and bad creative action, should engage his life in advancing in Krishna consciousness. As long as one is materially attached, one must accept the process of birth, death, old age, and disease. One is therefore advised that an intelligent person, instead of being entangled in so-called good and bad creative activities, should engage his life in advancing in Krishna consciousness, so that instead of accepting another material body, therefore they have Janmāṣṭamī 4.9 Bhāgavata. He will return home back to Jagannath. Hare Krishna. Actually, I'm completely exhausted, not able to even see the screen. So I'll stop here. Today I'll stop here. And as Janmāṣṭamī is approaching, my services will increase. But I'm promising you that I will try to be with you every day. Okay, this is the philosophy which Vasudeva is explaining to Kṛṣṇa, that he should not perform sinful activity. And he's explaining that body is in any case cannot be preserved. It will perish. So please do not perform such sinful activity. Okay, any questions so far? Or anything to ask or discuss? To what extent we have discussed in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam? Any clarification, question? Please read. I suggest all of you at least find 15-20 minutes to read the verses. If you don't read, then you will not be able to remember. No one? No question? Or any discussion? Well, I'll stop here today. And we will resume tomorrow. Krishna willing. Hare Krishna. Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. Nitai Gaur Prema. Hare Hare.